Do you work with moving and storing materials? Well, if so, you might be wondering about the risk involved. Material handling is an essential function in many workplaces, but it can also be a source of serious injuries and accidents if not performed correctly. The purpose of this training is to provide general guidelines and best practices for safe material handling, specifically in the context of moving and storage operations. Now, whether you're a seasoned professional or new to the industry, this training will help you understand the hazards associated with material handling and how to minimize the risk of injury or damage to property. By following the guidelines and recommendations presented here, you can help create a safer workplace for yourself and your coworkers. Moving and storage involves handling different types of stock, such as steel, wood, canisters, barrels, bottles, and other various materials. Now, these items can be bulky and awkwardly shaped and difficult to handle, which can lead to accidents and injuries. Additionally, fragile or hazardous items require extra care during handling, transportation, and storage. To minimize the hazards associated with moving and storing stock, all professionals must be trained on multiple safety measures, which we'll discuss in this training. Now, it's important to first consider equipment that can be utilized, such as dollies, carts, and straps, to help move heavy items more safely and efficiently. Additionally, personal protective equipment, or PPE, should be used. Examples might be gloves or safety shoes to protect from potential hazards. We'll discuss these safety measures in great detail throughout this training. Now, forklifts are powerful machines and as such can cause serious injuries or fatalities if not used correctly. Now, there are 7 different classes of forklifts ranging from Class 1 to Class 7. Each class has a specific function and is designed for a particular type of work. Hand trucks and dollies are commonly used to move materials and can help prevent strain injuries. However, they must be used correctly to avoid any damage or accidents. Now, there are several types of hand trucks and dollies available, including appliance hand trucks, platform trucks, and furniture dollies. Again, each type of equipment is designed for specific purposes and loads. Walk-behind buggies are commonly used in construction sites and other industrial settings to transport materials. However, they can also cause serious injuries or fatalities if not used correctly. Now, there are several types of walk-behind buggies available, including power buggies that run on gas or electricity and manual buggies. Now, each type of buggy is designed for precise use. Injuries related to equipment use can range from minor cuts and bruises to severe injuries or even fatalities. Therefore, it's essential to follow proper equipment safety procedures to prevent work injuries. Now, because of the wide variety of equipment used in material handling, depending on the workplace environment, it's important to be trained appropriately on the exact piece of equipment you'll be operating. Each machine has different guidelines, and it's critical to receive the proper training for the specific tool being utilized. Do you have all the information on the type of equipment you're using? You should have a solid understanding of the following details: how to operate it safely, how to perform daily inspections, how to respond to emergencies, specific limitations such as weight capacity, and how to avoid accidents. Now, it may be necessary to transport equipment throughout the workplace. And when doing this, it's important to follow proper transportation procedures, such as securing equipment to prevent it from falling or shifting during transport, establishing that the equipment is transported on appropriate routes within the workplace, and maintaining safe speeds during transportation to prevent accidents. Using the required appropriate personal protective equipment is also necessary to maintain workplace safety standards. PPE can include items such as hard hats, safety glasses, gloves, and steel-toed boots, all of which are aimed at protecting workers from injuries. Another way to prevent work injuries is the proper maintenance of your equipment. Do you have procedures in place for the following circumstances? Performing daily inspections of equipment before use to determine if it's in good working condition. Immediately reporting any defects found and repairing any issues before using the equipment. And also performing regular maintenance of equipment, such as oil changes and filter replacements. Depending on the type of equipment being operated, OSHA may require additional training or certification. Now, it's important to obtain this specialized training to better understand the nuanced practices of operation and to remain compliant with OSHA standards. Doing this adds another level of safety and security in the workplace. Now, as we already talked about, the use of equipment is crucial for many aspects of material handling. However, there may be occasions when manual handling is used in the movement and storage of certain materials instead. Manual handling of heavy items is one of the most common causes of workplace injuries in the United States. In the moving and storage industry, workers may be required to lift and carry items that weigh over 50 pounds, which can put a significant strain on the body. The weight of the items, combined with their size and shape, can make it difficult for workers to maintain balance and avoid accidents. Let's review some common manual handling hazards. Lifting and carrying heavy items requires proper lifting techniques to avoid harm. Lifting these items incorrectly can lead to back injuries, hernias, and other health issues. Workers must be trained on proper lifting techniques to minimize the risk of injuries. Repetitive motions such as bending, twisting, and reaching can lead to musculoskeletal disorders over time. It's imperative to take breaks between tasks to avoid repetitive motions that can lead to injuries. Awkward postures such as reaching above the head or bending down to lift heavy items can lead to back injuries, strains, and sprains. Always avoid awkward postures when handling heavy items to minimize the risk of harm. Some of the most common types of injuries related to material handling are musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs. Now, MSDs are disorders that affect the muscles, tendons, ligaments, and nerves, and other soft tissues of the body. Now, there are several types of MSDs that can occur in this line of work. Have you experienced any of the following? Lower back pain is one of the most common types of MSDs. It's caused by lifting, carrying, and moving heavy loads, which can put a strain on the lower back muscles and spine. Tendinitis is the inflammation of a tendon, which connects muscle to bone. Now, it can occur in the shoulders, elbows, wrists, and other areas of the body due to repetitive motions. Carpal tunnel syndrome is a condition that affects the wrist and hand. Now, it's caused by pressure on the median nerve, which runs through the wrist. If you have unfortunately experienced any of the workplace injuries we've been talking about, you may be asking, how can I prevent these injuries from happening? Now, this is where ergonomics is key, as it involves designing work environments and tasks to fit the physical abilities and limitations of employees. Using ergonomics can prevent MSDs and other possible work-related injuries. Here's some tips. Use appropriate lifting techniques. Now, workers should lift with their legs, not their backs, and avoid twisting or bending while lifting. Keep the work area organized. A cluttered work area can increase the risk of tripping, falling, or getting struck by objects. Keep the work area clean and tidy, and ensure that all equipment and materials are stored properly. Use mechanical aids. Instead of lifting heavy objects manually, use mechanical aids and equipment such as forklifts, hand trucks, and pallet jacks whenever possible. Use personal protective equipment. Workers should wear appropriate PPE such as gloves, safety glasses, and hard hats while handling materials. Evaluate tasks for ergonomic risk factors. Employers should evaluate tasks for risk factors mentioned such as repetitive motions, awkward postures, and heavy lifting. Measures should be implemented to eliminate or reduce these risk factors. Do you also work with moving or storing hazardous materials? If so, there are additional risks involved. These hazardous items can cause physical and health hazards to workers if not handled properly. And for that reason, it's essential to obtain hazard communication training to ensure that the risks associated with handling hazardous materials are properly understood. Physical hazards can include explosions, fires, and other risks that can cause injuries or property damage. Training should be provided to recognize and avoid physical hazards such as unstable chemicals or flammable materials. Education on proper handling techniques, such as using appropriate containers for hazardous materials and avoiding mixing incompatible chemicals, should also be provided. Health hazards can include respiratory problems, skin irritation, and other illnesses caused by exposure to dangerous chemicals. Workers should be trained to recognize and avoid health hazards, such as toxic chemicals or materials that can cause skin or eye irritation. Training on using appropriate personal protective equipment to reduce the risk of exposure to hazardous chemicals should also be provided in the workplace. Handling chemicals safely is a critical aspect of hazard communication. It's crucial to receive training on proper procedures for using, storing, and disposing of unsafe chemicals. Education should be provided on how to read and understand safety data sheets, or SDSs, which provide information on the dangers associated with specific chemicals and how to handle them safely. Material protection is another part of hazard communications. Training should be provided on how to properly store and handle materials to prevent spills and leaks. Information should also be available on how to respond to spills and leaks to minimize the risk of exposure to hazardous materials. Material handling activities can involve potential emergencies that require quick and appropriate responses to minimize harm to workers and property. Therefore, it's essential to provide employees with emergency procedure training to make sure that they understand the appropriate actions to take in case of an emergency. Potential emergencies can include accidents involving heavy equipment, slips and falls, electrical hazards, and fire hazards. Additional training on how to identify and to prevent these potential emergencies and how to respond appropriately if any of these situations occur should also be provided. Can you think of the plans in place at work for these potential emergency situations? First aid in medical emergencies can arise from injuries caused by heavy equipment, falls, or exposure to hazardous materials. Now, for these reasons, it's important to receive training on treating cuts, burns, and fractures, how to call for medical assistance, such as dialing 911, and how to provide necessary information to emergency responders. Fire safety is another crucial part of emergency procedure preparedness. Now, employees should be trained on how to prevent fires from starting, proper use and storage of flammable materials, how to skillfully use fire extinguishers and other fire suppression equipment, how to evacuate safely in case of a fire, and how to contact emergency services if a fire occurs. Hazardous material spills can occur during material handling activities. Therefore, workers should be trained on how to respond appropriately to minimize harm, including instruction on how to identify hazardous materials, the appropriate PPE to be used depending on the hazardous material, and how to contain and clean up spills safely. Material handling safety is critical in any workplace that involves the movement and storage of any materials. This training has highlighted some of the key considerations when it comes to protecting the safety of employees in such environment. By following the tips and best practices outlined in this course, employers can minimize the risk of accidents and injuries in the workplace. Material safety handling helps organizations maintain productivity, remain profitable, and above all else, help to ensure employee safety.